Hello and welcome to the newest episode of Dino, only on Riot Radio, or I guess the Media Hub, or wherever you're watching this. It really depends. We're on YouTube now. We're trying our best. My name is Eldin, and today we are continuing our journey through 37 different dinosaurs discovered in Canada. As the kind of journey goes on, you're going to see that a lot of them are from Alberta. It just seems to be the place to be. It's the most popular place for finding fossils in Canada, I believe. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. So last week we covered Ankylosaurus, which is a charcharodontid, so shark-toothed theropod, meat-eater. We covered Albertosaurus and Anchiceratops. Now today, we have no carnivores whatsoever, which is a bit of a twist, and instead we have two ceratopsians, which are relatives of Triceratops or Chasmosaurs, and then we also have Ankylosaurus, which is probably one of the best well-known ankylosaurids, thus the whole family is named after them. But yeah, we're going to get right into it because I actually got a lot of notes today, and I'm pretty excited for it. So to start us off, we have, and this is a very fun one, is Anchiceratops. Now, its Latin means near-horned face. I will put in the description, again, all the links I use, because there's some pretty good websites as well. Now, Anchisaurus, really cool. Bit of an issue, though, is it was named by Barnum Brown. So Barnum Brown named it in 1914. If you know Barnum Brown, the bone wars were a big thing. People were taking dinosaur bones, saying, this is a new dinosaur, look at me, I just discovered this dinosaur. And then 10 years later, they're like, oh, actually, these other 5 dinosaurs that we already named, they're all one species, and no one got it right. So it caused a lot of issues, and we're still to this day kind of rediscovering and putting things back together the way they should be, because they kind of went hog wild. Now, with that being said, the first remains of Anchiceratops was discovered along the Red Deer River in the Canadian province of Alberta, thus Canadian dinosaurs, in 1912, by an expedition led by, of course, Barnum Brown. So Barnum Brown, again, led a ton of expeditions. He's a guy. He's something else. So the complete skull was discovered by C.M. Sternberg in 1924, 20 kilometers northwest of Morin, Alberta. I have no idea where Morin is, but it's in Alberta, so that's cool. Now, it's part of the Chasmosaurine family. So Chasmosaurs are the species, or the family of Triceratopses that have a more defined frill that is much larger and not so much like Triceratops where it's kind of rounded. It's more like almost like a shield that goes straight up. Now, Chasmosaurines, really cool. I'm a big fan of that family. And actually, both of our ceratopsians today are Chasmosaurines. So, it had a larger frill with bony projections along the top and the sides. It would have had to have small to medium brow horns and a similar nasal horn. So, I should have a picture of how big it looks compared to a person. It's assumed that it could have been, or at least, was 4 meters long, possibly longer and larger, depending on, you know, if we have all the fossils and such. Again, it's tough. Paleontology is mostly speculation. You have only so many facts. Let's say it's 25% facts, and then the rest is kind of guesswork. You can only do so much. But we're trying our best. So it was found in Alberta, in the Horseshoe Canyon, in the Dinosaur Park, which is really cool. It was also found in the United States, so found in Wyoming, in the Almond Formation, which I have no idea where the Almond Formation, I've never heard of the Almond Formation, so that's kind of cool. It lived during the Cambrian to early Maastrichtian of the Cretaceous period, so about 74 to 70 million years ago. Not a young dinosaur in the sense of how early they started, but also not like the very last ones, which is pretty cool. Only the skull and skull fragments and some partial post-cranial material and almost a complete spine have been found. So, that being said, we picture the skull as well. Really cool. I'm fairly certain that this skull is being held at the ROM, which is amazing. I love that we have this like close to home. Now, with that being said, post-cranial, that's everything past the skull, or before the skull. I guess, yeah, after the skull. Now, with that being said, it's kind of tough. Sorry. I'm good. It's kind of tough because you have the skull. The problem is you don't know how big it could have been. Without legs, without ribs. It's really difficult to tell how tall it could be. It's really difficult to tell how long it could be. The spine lets us know that at least a length. But again, not knowing how old the individual was that left the spine, you don't know. It could have been younger, it could have been older, it could have been smaller than the other ones. It's really tough to decide. So with that being said, it is what it is. We kind of just hope for the best. Now, let me find my notes. Where the bones were found, though, suggest that they lived around estuaries. Now, with estuaries, any kind of like watered area or watered ground makes it really hard to collect fossils because let's say it dies and turns to bones, well, the water's going to wash the bones away. So it makes it really difficult to tell what was what, where it was. We know estuaries are probably where it was, but again, it makes it really tough. And it also makes it like the ground's almost too soft to hold on, so it's not going to sit there and fossilize nicely. So there's another supposed species of Anchiceratops that was found and named Anchiceratops longirotis, which was known for its longer snout and kind of like a forward curving horns instead of the upper curving horns. Anchiceratops is their name is ornatus, which is really cool. A. ornatus. Now we know that it might not have been a different species and could have just been sexual dimorphism, so it was males versus females. We don't really see a ton of that in dinosaurs all the time. You see it in birds, and birds are dinosaurs, so I guess you kind of see it, but it's really cool to think that. Now, the males had the upward-facing horns, the females had the forward-facing horns. The males also had a shorter snout, and the thought is with a shorter snout, it would have allowed them to have easier territorial battles, because when you have this big, long nose, you can't really like vie for competition if you just guys keep hitting your noses when you're trying to hit with the frill and the actual horns. So it's an idea, we're running with it, but until then, that is what it is. Yeah, and the Anchiceratops skull is being held in the Royal Ontario Museum, which the other thing we're going to talk about today is also being held there too. Moving on to another one is Ankylosaurus. Now I love Ankylosaurus. Walking with dinosaurs, Ankylosaurus wrecks a T-Rex, hits him with his tail club and says, "That's enough for you, buddy, you're done. You're not going home today." So Ankylosaurus' name means either fused lizard or bent lizard. Really cool. Also discovered by Barnum Brown. Again, Barnum Brown, not the best. That was 1908. It lived during the Maastrichtian of the Cretaceous around 68 to 66 million years ago. So it was one of the last non-avian dinosaurs. 65 million years ago, dinosaurs died out. This one was just a million years short of being there for the asteroid, which is really cool to think about. It was found in Alberta in the Horseshoe Canyon Formation and the Scollard Formation. It was also found in Montana, New Mexico, and Wyoming, which, again, a well-traveled dinosaur. And the problem with saying Ankylosaurus is there's a bunch of other species of Ankylosaurus, quote-unquote, different names, smaller specimens, all that jazz. But Ankylosaurus is just what we're going to blanket it as today. Now, Ankylosaurus, we should have a picture of it as well. The problem with this, though, we don't have a ton. We have the skull, a couple ribs, and the tail club. That's it. Again, the problem with having a quote-unquote well-known dinosaur that is just the skull, you can't really know how big it could be. You don't get to say, hey, we know how big it was. Well, no, you don't. You know how big the skull was. And the way that they base the sizing off of Ankylosaurus is basing it off of other ankylosaurids or nodosaurs, which are part of the family, that have a similar sized head. It's thought that Ankylosaurus was the largest or one of the largest ankylosaurids ever. Again, the skull's huge, so it makes sense. But it could also just be like a My Littlest Pet Shop and have a giant head and a tiny body. We're not really sure, so we're going to try and find out hopefully eventually. So it was found in the same area as nodosaurs. So nodosaurid ankylosaurids, again, are part of the family, which are less armored, smaller dinos in the same family without tail clubs for the most part. They have different assortments. Now, I said compared to other ankylosaurids, the skull belonging to the ankylo. We know it was big. It's thought that it could have been around 6.25 meters in length, with the same people believing it could get up to 8 meters, so about 20 to 26 feet, or 26 feet. And the problem is it weighed around 4.8 to 8 metric tons, or that's 5.3 to 8.8 short tons. I don't know what a short ton is, but it was mentioned. But again, it's guesswork. We don't know how big this thing was. There should be a picture of an ankylosaurid next to an elephant. Like, it's huge. When you think elephants, elephants are gigantic, and this ankylosaur was much longer, not nearly as tall, but armored to the teeth. Now, again though, with just the skull and a couple ribs, it's really difficult. Now, what's been found is the skull, teeth, osteoderms, some vertebrae, a couple limb bones, the ribs, and the tail club. Now, the tail club, I love the tail club. This big, meaty, I didn't say meaty, it's actually like just hard as rock. Used for defense, we think. So the main problem is, again, it's a quote-unquote well-known dinosaur, but we only have so many pieces of it. Anchiceratops, Ankylosaur, and we're talking about Arrhinoceratops as well. We only have certain bones, but they're so well-known, it's kind of tough to really decide. Now, from the skull and the teeth, we know that it was made for cropping vegetation, so it must have loved its vegetation. But there was no grinding teeth, which means that its digestion, or digestive system, that's the word, was probably tailored towards digesting unchewed food. Not so much like a cow, but like it didn't have the teeth for it. So it was just kind of cropping like a lawnmower and then just sucking it back. Now, it's thought that since it was so low to the ground, its head-wise, and its head was so large, that it would probably have its vision obscured by vegetation often. When you are this hulking, armored dinosaur with a big head and an armored neck, you can't really look up, which is an issue, right? So this thing would walk through the woods, or wherever it was, with its head low to the ground, chopping vegetation, and probably not being able to see much because, again, your eyes are only looking forward, and there's grass all around you, which is kind of a fun fact, I thought. Now, the tail club originally was thought to be used for defense. I think I have a picture of that as well, of an ankylosaur bonking a T-Rex. But it's thought that it could have actually been used for territorial combat with rival males, kind of like how we see with any kind of like wild goats or wild sheep, anything like that, like using the horns. It's not entirely sure. I'm assuming that's based off of maybe finding ankylosaurid bones that have been damaged by tail clubs. There wasn't a ton of information online about that, unfortunately, but we'll go with that. Now, our last dinosaur of the day is an interesting one. Its name is Arrhinoceratops. Yeah, it's just very easy name to say. Its name means no nose, horn, face. Very simple, very easy dinosaur. Problem is, it's quote-unquote well-known, but we have literally nothing of this dinosaur. So it was named by William Arthur Parks in 1925. Again, Parks, I'm also pretty sure, was part of the Bone Wars, so take that with a grain of salt. The remains were collected from the Neil's Ranch site along the Red Deer River in Alberta in 1923. The expedition was actually from the University of Toronto, which is really cool. Now, we should have a picture as well of what we have of Arrhinoceratops, which is literally just the top of the skull. So you'll see it in the picture, or if you're listening, then you can't really see it, unfortunately, sorry. But it's got the nice frill, it's got kind of like the frontal nose, the eye sockets are not really there, so it's literally just like a skull cap. But since it's a ceratopsian, you see the frill, which is really cool. Some horns as well. That tells us a bit about the dinosaur, but not much. So it lived during the Maastrichtian stage of late Cretaceous, so 83.5 to 66 million years ago. That's a long reign for a dinosaur, but also guesswork. The size and weight, we have no idea. Because we only have the top of the skull, and we have no postcranial remains at all, it's very difficult to kind of guess where or like how big this thing was. Now, we know the really cool thing about this thing is it's actually housed at the ROM, which anything about the ROM is really cool for me. There's been lots of guesses as to the size and weight of this thing, so you should have a picture of it, what people think it looked like, but again, you don't know. It's very tough to kind of guess. It's just an interesting creature, to say the least. The basis of it, though, is basing it off of other ceratopsians with similar skull sizes. So it's kind of guesswork as well, but we're going with it. Now, Arrhinoceratops has also been found alongside other bones of its species, like Pachyrhinosaurus, Anchiceratops, which is really cool, and Eotriceratops, which I've never heard of. Now, we already talked about Anchiceratops at the start of this episode. We'll talk about Pachyrhinosaurus when we get to the P, and I believe Eoceratops we'll also talk about, which would be cool, so stay tuned for that. Arrhinoceratops is from the same Chasmosauran family. So again, a really cool frill, nice and long, not like your Triceratops, which is really rounded, more ornate. I just think that's really cool. But unfortunately, that's it for that dinosaur. We have not a ton of information about this thing. It was a very easy episode, to say the least, because all we have is skulls of these things. Like, it's really tough. Like, of course, there's other bones, but the skull is important to know what its head looked like, but you need more to kind of guess. With that being said, though, we're coming to the end of our episode. I really hope you enjoyed today. I kind of felt a little shorter, but there wasn't a ton of information, unfortunately. I hope you enjoyed the show. Next week, we're going to talk about Brachiocephalosaurus, Centrosaurus, and Chasmosaurus. So Chasmosaurus, the family named after the Chasmosaur. We'll talk about that next week as well. We're into the B's, we're out of the A's now, and we're on into the C's. With that being said, though, my name's Eldin Atkin. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hopefully this is at least like piquing your interest and getting you to check out other dinosaur content. With that, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time.